Hey guys, how you doing today? This is Gilbert with Interactive Utopia. I want to talk to you about today about a project that I'm working on currently, but I wanted to share some of that information with you. And it's basically interactive with the Google Solar API using HTML and JavaScript. They have a little bit of information about that, but it's using React. So if you want to just use it for your web application or on your website, this would be the way to go. Or of course, there's many different ways to go, but this is the way that I decided that would work for me and for my project. Okay. So if you want to know a little bit more about me, or if you need any assistance with your project, you can go to interactiveutopia.com and you can contact me through there. And all right, so let's go ahead and show you what we're going to be working with today. So basically, this is what I created. The Google Solar API. It's an API that provides you information about buildings. Like where they're getting sun, where they're getting shady areas. You can look like at an annual average, at a monthly average, at a hourly, the hourly average. So there's a lot of information that it can provide. You can change the time on it, and then you can kind of see where you're getting shade, where you're getting sun. So you can kind of tackle, or you can kind of decide where you want to install the modules. So it's a very important, very powerful API. The only problem is that it's tricky to interact with it if you don't have a lot of experience. More because it provides you something called GOT files, which is like images that have coordinates and a lot of information on them. So they need to be processed before we actually put them on the map per se. And then it also provides you like some building information, and you can create things like, like in this case, it's an output calculator just based on the amount of modules that you can have, and the output of each module, it'll give you like the output of them. Okay, so simple on the eye, hard to get, to get it done. So let's get started. Of course, the most important place where you can find information about this API, it's on the Google Maps platform documentation website. They have all the information that you need, all the documentation. At first, it's a little bit hard to get a grasp on, but once you kind of get a hold of it, everything makes sense and everything connects. We will need to handle coordinates, so project4.js it's what we're going to be using, and then to process those geotiff images, we're going to be using geotiff.js. So the links are on the code. You can just copy and paste them, and just download it, or make sure to have them on your project directory. And of course, if you need the information, you can go to my GitHub page and get the code from there. That's what we're going to be looking at, the code, which is right over here. So if you go to the API page, you'll see, the main page, but we go to, or let's start with the index file. So of course, it all starts with a HTML page, correct? That's where you're going to have your where you're gonna download your JavaScript files, where you're gonna have your DOM, like for example where you're gonna be displaying the map, how you want to display, your select options. So it's just HTML code, nothing super tricky in there. You can revise it as you want, or you can add, remove. The most important thing is this part right here, which is a container for the map, and then of course the controls and the address selection, because if not, it's not going to work. The rest is just displaying things, so you can add or remove as you need. But yeah, so we'll start right here. HTML page. We want to create a map. So the first thing is we want to create a map using the Google Maps API. That's pretty simple. We gotta get it from their server and then apply it onto our page. So this will download the framework per se to your application, or the required files, and then you just need to have the like the canvas and the proper HTML elements in there. Um, for it to work, again, we got the GeoTIFF framework, the Project 4 framework, and I added Bootstrap, which is, a CSS framework, just to kind of make it a little bit nicer. I know it's not the nicest one, but it makes organizing everything a bit easier. And then what we need is going to be right in here, GC Solar API library. Okay, and then from there we're going to start with the global file. This one basically just where you put your API key. You're gonna need to put it here, and then you're gonna need to put it on the HTML page because you need it for your for the Google Maps to download those files. So just be sure to add it here, and again on the index dot or I have a PHP, but index.html, whatever you have, just add it in the header tag as well. Okay, but in here we have that, and they're just the variables that are global to our code. We have our color palettes, we have our layers, what each one is, the months of the year, just things that we need for our code to work, and then all the selectors down here. So that's the global.js. From there, we have the if we go to the index.php, you can see how I added it. Global, the GeoTIFF, then the Solar API, then the maps. So the GeoTIFF.js, this is what processes the GeoTIFF files. Like it loads and renders them, it adds them, it kind of takes care of all that fancy stuff for you. And I'll go in a different video, I'll try to go into a little bit more detail on how exactly it works. It's a tricky section. And then from there we have the Solar API.js, which is the functions that apply to the Solar API, like find the data find the information that it's on the closest building to the latitude and longitude that we provide. I know it's a little weird how it works, but basically from an address you need to get its latitude and longitude, and then once you have that, you provide it to this function. That function looks for the closest building to that location or coordinates, which I guess it's the address, and then it provides you the data from there. Okay, and then like the calculator, we have it here, and then just some more event listeners. So again, this is to work with the Solar API, and then we have the maps.js, which is it's also going to be working with the Solar API, but this is where all the processing of the map is going to occur. This function right here, as I mentioned, is where it takes the address that is being provided, and then it sends it to Google, and that's what's going to give you the latitude and your longitude variables, or your numbers, so that you can use for your map. I'll just explain how the map works kind of really quick. This is the function that sets the map up. You can kind of see it starts with just adding some of the event listeners for the functions, like update month, update hour. This is just to update, where you see at the control area, it kind of shows the month and the hour. So it just, when you change the range, it changes the value of that. It's pretty simple. This information right here, it's pretty important because it's basically how the information that you want to retrieve from the Google Solar API for the layers, for the data layers that are going to be shown on your map that you're going to be showing people, and basically you give them the latitude, the longitude, the radius meter is how wide you want that image to be. You can go over 100, but then you don't get as much information, so 100 would be the maximum that I would suggest. Full layers, that just means if you want to do like all the layers or not. If we go to here, let's see if it provides me the data. So these are the different layers that you received. But if you go, where's the information? Let's see if it's going to give us. Here we go. So location, as I mentioned, latitude and longitude, radius meters, how wide you want it to be, the quality you want it to be, the pixel size in meters that you want it to be. These are the types of layers. So if you just want, this is the one we're using, full layers, but if you only want the DSM layer, then you can just use that one. So there's a lot of different options, and that's why I said documentation is key. So if you have any questions about it, or if you're trying to do something different, just go to the documentation and it's going to give you all that information. Alrighty, so let's go back to our code over here. Let's close that up really quick. Okay. Alrighty, so once it makes that call to that URL, then we're gonna get the data and we're just gonna add it to our layers. You know, the DSM, I'm asking for all of them, so DSM, RGB, annual, monthly, the hourly. So you know, I retrieve that data, and in here we're getting the URLs that data is providing us. So if we go to the documentation, where it gives us the response, this is the response we're going to be getting, and these are the layers. So it just gives us a URL for the GOT file that we need to process. So first we provide the information for them. He's going to give us a list of URLs, and then we need to process those URLs. So I'm saving those URLs into the Solr layer variables, so that then we can use them to accordingly to call for whichever one. It's through whichever one you want, and then this section right here applies the mask to it, and then we do our first call, which basically it checks for which layer is selected. You can set the default on the HTML, and then it kind of loads that up for you, and then it shows it on the map. It uses so in here it's kind of getting the boundary boxes, the location where you want that overlay to be at, and then it kind of creates the overlay for you. So yeah, you know, simple, straightforward. This right here, you're gonna find it on the GOT document, and yeah, that's basically what's gonna create the overlay using the bounds that we provide, the canvas, and of course, you know, the map. And yeah, so the rest of it, you know, we add event listeners. It kind of has all the logic for it. You know, you can again change if you want to. Let's say you want to do the annual, look at it, or if you want to look at September, it just takes a minute. If you want to add modules, and then you'll change the output for it. So pretty straightforward, but again, remember, your hardest thing is probably going to be working with the GOT files, and that's pretty much the code right here, which basically what it does is it fetches the GOT file from the URL that was provided to us. Don't forget to add the API key to it, and then from there it creates, you know, array from buffer. It basically creates like an object for it. It creates the image for it. So one important thing to notice before I forget, some of the GOT files are only one layer, so you don't have to worry too much about them. But for example, on the month GOT file, it has 12 layers to it, January through December. So you have to know how to interact with it, because basically you have the object, and then layer 0 is like January, layer 11 would be December. So depending on the month you want to be, you want to work on that layer. But then when you go to hourly, it's a little bit even trickier, because it has 12 layers that have 24 sub layers, which basically is you have 12 layers for January through December, and then you also have the hour. So you can select, for example, I want to see the average shade for December at 4 o'clock, and then it'll show you that. So again, you got to go through the select the month and then select the hour on the layers themselves. So that's a little bit of a tricky thing. And then you can kind of see right here. So on the rasters, you can kind of see where it says hour. That's selecting the hour out of those layers that have been selected on the month. Over here, well, I select the month on the prior step, but if not, basically what happens is you get, for example, raster. Where would it be? Rasters. So rasters, it's number 0 would be month January, and then you would go raster 01 for like hour for 1 a.m. or something like that. So that's the tricky part. And also another complicated scenario is there's two things to consider when you're doing the hourly scenario. Nighttime. When there's night, it's just a black image, so that usually creates an error. So you just gotta change it into a black image and then use that for your overlay so that it doesn't create the error. So that's a big important thing to consider. This section right here, it kind of changes the colors depending on the type of layer that it's been selected. That way you can kind of see the effects on the coloring. If not, it'll just be like a gray image, so it's not going to work. And another thing to consider that is very important is sometimes the hourly files are going to be, or the hourly images are half the size as your regular layers. So when you get your layers, one of those layers is going to be your mask. But how do you work if your mask is twice the size as the hourly layers? How do you make them work? So you have to resize them to make them compatible. So in this scenario, I'm resizing the mask and making it the same size as the layer, and that way they match up, and then it can be used as a mask. Because if the size of the mask and the size of the image is different, it's not going to work. It's going to look weird. So yeah, just make sure that you're taking that into consideration as well. And yeah, again, just this is a section that it adds it. You gotta create you create a canvas where you display that image. With that canvas, it's added into a div, then that div is added as the overlay. So tricky, but again, just so that you know the steps. But at the end of the day, it's an image that is put onto that Google map. Okay, so the GOT file, again, if you want to get more information about it, you can go. They have a page over right here on the documentation, tells you what each one is, how deep you can go into details, kind of tells you, for the hourly 12 URLs, for the hourly shades, for the months, and then it contains 24 bands, which is for the hours of the day. If the pixels are all 0, then it's nighttime. If they're not, then that means there's light. Again, for this one, it's just one file, but it contains 12 bands. So yeah, so in this one, from the array, so what it says is, hourly shades is going to contain 12 of these ones, and each one contains 24. So then you would have to go hourly shades, I don't know, on space number 0, and then that would be the month of January, and then you go to band, I don't know, 12 for 12 o'clock or something like that, depending on what you want to get. And again, all the information on how to do the calls and everything, it's going to be here in the documentation. But yeah, just kind of wanted to show you. You can remove the overlay, you can add the overlay back again. And yeah, if you change the address, this is just a random address that I found online. It takes a minute, right? Like right now, we're using a wider section of the area. So if we use like 50 meters or something, depending on what your project is going to be needing, then it's only going to be giving you one house. In this case, you can see we got like, I don't know, 20 houses or something like that. So it just takes more time. but you can change the address, and the same thing, you know, if you want to change the month or something, it's just gonna do all that information for you automatically. Kind of see there, it's a little bit clearer of a color. So the lighter the color, the more sun it's gonna have. For example, if we go to January, which they don't have as much power, you can see there is darker sections. So for example, in here you would think like, oh yeah, you want to put your solar panels on this side. You can kind of see the house on this bottom. It has panels here, panels here, panels here. So that kind of works. Versus if you put them on the other side, it wouldn't make as much of a sense, because then they would be receiving less power in them. So it's just some of that information that can be given by this API. So very powerful, very important, but pretty hard to get a hold of, or you know, to develop the way to handle those GOT files. So I hope that works. And just really quick for the Google Solar API, that's just super simple stuff. For example, it's calculating the information. So the calculator, the Solar API has a section called Building Insights, and in there it provides you pretty much all this information right here. I just kind of got a little bit out of it, you know, postal code, administrative area. A lot of it you kind of already have, but if you want to double check. But in here, like the solar potential section is pretty good, because it tells you the maximum panels that you can have on the property, the maximum area for the arrays or for the panels that you can use. So that's pretty important. It even tells you like the pitch that you can put the panels at. So for example, in here, the pitch, you know, that's the angle, or then the azimuth degrees, that's like north to south degrees on how you want to install them. So it's pretty fascinating. That's one of the things that I'm doing the application for my customer for. So you know, take that information and use it to whatever your use it will be. But basically for my calculator, I take this number, and then it kind of gives you 250 watts as default. But for example, for the newer panels, they're 395 watts, 500 watts, you know, there's different sizes. So for example, in here, it can have 86 modules, which is a 34 kilowatt system. That's humongously big. So let's say they go, usually a house like this, they'll go like 18 modules or something like that, which is a 7 kilowatt per hour output, which is still a pretty big system. But that means 18 panels at 395. So if you have different panels, and let's say, you know, you have a 500 watt panel or something like that at 18, that's going to be a different number. So it's just a way of creating the systems, calculating the systems, and with all that information you can just do more calculators, more things. In the future, if you're interested, leave me comments and I'll kind of do more of that for you. But in reality, you know, once you get the information, once you get the JSON data, you can just do whatever you want with it. There's nothing tricky. You're not working with the API anymore. It's just your personal, or your code, or your project code, that however you want to use this information for. Okay, so that's about it for now. If you have any comments, or if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comment box below. If you like the video, please do subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. And yeah, so once again, my name is Gilberto Cortez. I'm with Interactive Utopia, and if you need if you have any questions, or if you need any assistance with your projects, or you're building a similar application like this with the Google Solar API, GOT files, Google Maps API, or anything similar, feel free to reach out to me, and it will be my pleasure to help you out. Okay, so I thank you again, and I hope that you have a really nice day. Goodbye.